You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, 8th of December 2014. 3 Peterborough, Cambridgeshire child sex ring members face trial. 9 followers of hate preacher Anjem Choudary given Asbos for street violence. Top judge quits after racist slur in court made against an Asian harassment victim. My £60,000 in benefits helped build my house. Romanian migrant boasts handouts from the UK have helped him construct home for wife and children in his homeland. Russia says France must deliver warships or pay back money. China sentences 8 to death for attacks in Xinjiang. FBI investigates St. Louis hate crime after armed gang dragged Bosnian woman out of her car, threatened to kill her, just 5 days after Bosnian man was hammered to death nearby. Shrien Dewani murder case thrown out by South African judge. Thought for the day, mixed metaphors, historic abuse and the Muslim grooming gets the World at 8 treatment. And finally, 2 for 1 day Monday. UK News. 3 Peterborough, Cambridgeshire child sex ring members face trial. 3 ringleaders of an alleged child sex ring at a stand trial next year for forcing teenage girls into prostitution. Mohammed Kubaib, 43, Kadir Ahmed, 27, and Manasi Motang, 31, are accused of raping and molesting the girls between 2007 and 2013. The court heard 23 alleged victims. All who were aged between 13 and 17 are due to claim they were raped, sexually abused and forced into prostitution by the men. The 3 defendants appeared in court to deny 17 charges of child trafficking, forced prostitution, rape and sexual activity with a child. World date. Pity Afzal doesn't investigate his countrymen as well as he does our white abusers. I wonder if there is a reason behind that. 9 followers of hate preacher Anjem Choudary given Asbos for street violence. 9 followers of hate preacher Anjem Choudary were placed under temporary antisocial behaviour orders following their conviction for Muslim sectarian violence in the UK. Members of the group are now banned from attending unauthorised protest rallies or setting up dawah, which is preaching stalls without permission. They're also restricted from being in a mob, which is either carrying a flagpole or burning items in public. Judge Paul Worsley issued the interim ASBO ahead of a full hearing at the Old Bailey on the 23rd of January next year. World date, that should be interesting. I wonder if their families or communities will pay their fines or their legal representation next year. Probably not. Top judge quits after racist slur in court made against Asian harassment victim. One of Britain's senior immigration judges made a racial slur against an Asian woman victim in a harassment case. Judge Richard Hollingworth has withdrawn from judicial duties and resigned as a deputy district judge after telling a shocked court, with a name like Patel she can only be working in a corner shop or off licence. Lovely, so true. Hollingworth is now under investigation and could face the sack from another post he holds. He dropped his bombshell at a hearing after asking a prosecution team if they could bring forward the case against a Mr. Singh accused of bombarding Miss Patel with texts and threats. He was told it was not possible to hear it on that day as it was not listed and because Miss Patel was not in court. Justice Hollingworth, 63, said she can't be doing anything important. When Crown Prosecution Service lawyers asked what he meant, he replied, with a name like Patel, she can only be working in a corner shop or off licence. Poor fellow. My £60,000 in benefits helped build my house. Romanian migrant boasts handouts from the UK have helped him construct home for wife and children in his homeland. A Roma gypsy says he's using the £60,000 he has received in benefits to create a lavish house in his homeland. Ion Lazar boasts that British handouts are funding the refurbishment of the property in the village of Argetoia in southern Romania. He said, I know the benefit I can make very easily in England. It's coming in benefits. It's like free money. Thank you, England. Oh, God. Mr Lazar, 36, a part-time self-employed scrap metal collector in London, pays no tax as he earns so little and claims £1,700 a month in welfare. The father of three's comments will feature in a Channel 5 documentary to be shown this week. Mr Lazar came to Britain with 5 other immigrants when the work restrictions on Romanians were lifted in January. World at 8. Oh God. Lazar is similar to Mozart. Go hide your head, Lynn. What a bastard. What a clever bastard. We Brits should try the same. Let's all migrate to Romania and claim money. European news. Russia says France must deliver warships or pay back money. French President François Hollande and Russian President Vladimir Putin did not discuss warship sales. Russia would accept either money or the delivery of the 2 warships that France has delayed, according to a Kremlin official. Under pressure from the United States and its allies in the European Union, France suspended the delivery of a Mistral warship to Russia over Moscow's role in the Ukraine crisis. French President François Hollande last month said Paris would block the delivery indefinitely. Both options will suit us, either the ships or the money. The money spent must be recovered. The Kremlin's foreign policy aide said following talks between Hollande and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The US and the EU has accused Russia of fueling the conflict in eastern Ukraine by providing weapons and manpower to the pro-Russian rebels that have seized key cities and surrounding areas. Russia has denied any involvement in the conflict. World at 8. If you order something in good faith and pay for it, you should be able to take delivery of it, whatever political rumpuses are going on. Business is business. World news. China sentences 8 to death for attacks in Xinjiang. A Chinese court on Monday sentenced 8 people to death on charges of leading terror groups and setting off explosives in 2 attacks that left 46 people dead in the far western region of Xinjiang, home of the Muslim Uyghur minority, state media said. The Urumqi Intermediate People's Court in the capital of Xinjiang also handed out suspended death sentences to 5 others, China Central Television said, without mentioning when the trials were held. Violence linked to Xinjiang has killed about 400 people in and outside the region over the past 20 months. Beijing has blamed the attacks on radical separatists with foreign ties, although critics and human rights advocates say Uyghurs have chafed under the repressive rule of the Han Chinese-dominated government. Uyghurs also complain of economic disenfranchisement with the inflow of Han Chinese to their homeland. Beijing says it's pumping investments into the region to help it grow. Most attacks have been mounted against state targets such as police stations, military checkpoints and government buildings, but assailants have also struck at civilians in several recent incidents, slashing at crowds with knives or setting off bombs at train stations and commercial areas. Initial state media reports said the attack was the work of a 5-member terror group, including the assailants who died. However, CCTV said on Monday that 6 people were sentenced to death on charges of terrorism, use of explosives and endangering public safety. It did not explain why the number of suspects grew. Authorities responded to the attacks by launching a 1-year crackdown on violence in Xinjiang, where security was already tight following riots in Urumqi in 2009 that left nearly 200 people dead, according to official count. While Beijing insists there are no flaws in its ethnic policies, the top leadership has made some adjustments. It has agreed to provide free high school education in southern Xinjiang, which has the highest concentration of Uyghurs, and promised employment for at least 1 member of each household in the poverty-stricken region. World at 8. For the communists amongst us, China is the one place on God's earth you do not rebel, renounce, demonstrate or bomb. They simply reject any form of democracy, as indeed the imperial courts did in years gone by. It is a chink thing. To use slang which has been criticised. I use it, so anyone can. I'm sure the Chinese have slang words for us and other Europeans or foreigners, so it really doesn't matter. FBI investigates St. Louis hate crime after armed gang dragged Bosnian woman out of her car, threatened to kill her just 5 days after Bosnian man was hammered to death nearby. A St. Louis woman was dragged out of her car, attacked and threatened with murder because she is Bosnian, police claim. Officers called in the FBI to investigate the case as a hate crime 5 days after a Bosnian man was hammered to death nearby. Police said the victim, 26, was driving around a gang of black teenagers at 5:25 on Friday morning when one pulled a gun and ordered her to stop. One struck the windshield with a crowbar and another pulled her out of the car. The gang, believed to be all male, then went through her empty purse and threw her cell phone on the ground, St Louis Post-Dispatch reported. They asked where she was from and she said she was European, she claims. "You're an expletive liar," one man allegedly shouted at the woman. "You're Bosnian. I should just kill you now." They then pushed her back to the ground and kicked her. She was found unconscious by passers-by but opted not to go to hospital. The reported encounter prompted St Louis police to call the FBI to investigate the case as a hate crime. It comes 5 days after Zamir Bijig, 32, a South City resident of Bosnian descent, was driving home with his newlywed wife at around 1:15 a.m. when police say a group of teenagers approached his car and began vandalising it. Bejic emerged from his vehicle to try and stop them, at which point the teenagers allegedly attacked him with hammers, striking him in the head, face and abdomen. The motorist was taken to an area hospital where he died from his injuries a short time later. His wife escaped unharmed after her husband reportedly shielded her from the attackers with his body. Suspect Robert Mitchell, 17, turned himself in Sunday night after two of his alleged accomplices, aged 15 and 16, were arrested by police, reported St Louis Post-Dispatch. The 17-year-old is being charged as an adult with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. World date. Well, Bosnians are usually white, so yes, this is a hate crime as the perps seem to be black. But I don't see riots happening when the victims are white, do you? Shrien Dewani murder case thrown out by South African judge. A judge has dismissed the case against Shrien Dewani, who was accused of arranging the murder of his wife Annie in South Africa. Judge Jeanette Travers said the evidence presented by the prosecution fell far below the threshold of what a reasonable court could convict on. She said the evidence of the prosecution's main witness, taxi driver Zola Tongo, was riddled with contradictions and highly debatable. Mr Dewani will now be released. Announcing her ruling, the judge said the accused is found not guilty of this charge. She said the only reason not to grant the application would be in the hope that Mr Dewani would implicate himself if he gave evidence. But to do so would be a manifest misdirection, she said, lies and inconsistencies. Mr Dewani from Bristol was extradited to South Africa this year to face trial, accused of planning the murder of his wife in November 2010. He listened intently as key evidence against him was criticised by the judge as she gave her ruling over almost 3 hours. Mr Dewani, 34, went straight down to the cells to prepare for his release following his decision as his family embraced. Prosecutors said bisexual Mr Dewani had long planned to get out of the relationship to Swedish-raised Annie and arranged the attack in which she would escape unharmed and Annie would be killed. Judge Traverso said it was crucial for the state's case to prove that Mr Dewani entered into an agreement with the others to have Annie killed. The judge said Tongo and accomplices Ziwamdoda Kwabi and Zolili Ngeni were intelligent men and dismissed the prosecution claim that they would have carried out a contract killing for Mr Dewani for a few £1,000. Tongo is serving an 18-year jail term for his role in the murder and Kwabi is partway through a 25-year-old jail sentence for his role. Ngeni was serving life for firing the shot that killed Mrs Dewani but died in prison from a brain tumour. World date. That says it all. Brain tumour, poor bugger. A little known fact is that Annie was raped before she died and apparently Dewani said her killers could do that. This has been airbrushed over the last few years. This man is as guilty as hell, but will get away with it by acting like a retard most of the time since. And his family should have a contract out on him before long. Thought for the day. Mixed metaphors. Historic abuse and Muslim grooming get the World at 8 treatment. I thought I was going to need the sick bucket when I watched last week's news on the Ray Terrick case when my old enemy Nazir Afzal took centre stage outside the court after the sentence. I think you will find his words rather reminiscent in that he's never used them about the various and many Muslim sexual grooming and abuse cases that have come to light over the past couple of years, and I quote, "He singled his victims out for attention using charm and flattery before subjecting them to callous assaults. Some he groomed over a period of time, others he assaulted soon after he first met them." I will come back to that quote later, but first the words from one of the historic victims who claimed she was vulnerable because she didn't get compliments on her figure at home. Duh! How would it go down if her father had said, "Oh my, what a sexy figure you have nowadays"? Then incest would rear its very ugly head, wouldn't it? Since when has vulnerable meant stupid and fatuous? The true meaning of the word vulnerable is someone who is needy, who has no parents and usually no home life at all, learning difficulties or in state care. Now that is vulnerable, not some needy vain teenager who hangs around a guy's record shop and goes to his flat alone to listen to records and drink vodka. What the hell did she expect? A game of tiddlywinks. The old thing about mixed messages has never died. I have the greatest sympathy for what I call true rape victims. Those who are drugged, gang raped or raped and tortured and killed. Those are true rapes. Rape isn't just about control, which is what women's rights seem to think. It's also about making money and, yes, sex. Or using someone for sexual advantage, which might or might not come under simply control. Rape or assault can also be a crime of simply being there, going on a date with a stranger, picking up a stranger in a club or pub, getting into the wrong minicab, going home and inviting a stranger in, and many more things. The old adage of choosing your company carefully seems to have been forgotten, but in the 60s and 70s it still stood that if you wanted a fire, you stepped into the fireplace. I was young once and attractive, and it was taken for granted you didn't go anywhere alone with a guy after dark unless your parents knew him, and you certainly didn't frequent odd record shops to drink vodka with an older man unless you knew what you were doing. It was just part of growing up. Luckily, I was okay. I remember champing at the bit over Egan Brunner in Singapore and his pals who were eminently trustworthy, but when I wanted a good night kiss at 15 years from this gorgeous fella, my mother was standing there waiting for us, so that was that. Something I have always regretted. But in fairness, girls were not fodder for sexual abusers in general, and I can only speak for me and my circle. I trawled the coffee houses when back in the UK later, but apart from kisses and flirting, young men seemed to have more of a handle on themselves than now. But of course we're talking about semi-stars who were older and far wiser than the girls they slept with. Girls in those days chased pop stars and anyone on the TV, fact of life. I would think anyone famous up north had his pick of whatever turned up and was willing. And let's face it, most of those girls, abused and assaulted, were willing to start with, or why would they go to a man's flat alone and get sloshed? These historic abuse cases have reached the laughable stage, which is sad for those who really didn't want to get abused, but that is life. Wrong place, wrong time rules our lives, but in those cases it might prove profitable even for the media. Some retard's story of how she was sexually abused whilst enjoying every minute of it at the time. Of course money is at the root of many of these victims crawling out of the eons of time with marvellous memories. Even the poor guys from the Survivors Club only hope to get money because what else can they get? It's done. The clock cannot be turned back or their lives made better by new investigations, however pricey or public they may be. Who knows if one's life would have been better or worse had they not been abused? Racking it all up must come at a cost, and personally it's something I would not like to have spread all over the papers or the news. Now I come to Afzal and his pontificating outside the court and wondered to myself if he would use language and emotion like that over, say, the Charlene Downs case or the many other unnamed victims of his countrymen and fellow religious communities. Would he go into the personal and family life with photos of Mohammed Gubaib or Kadir Ahmed or Manasi Motang, who are the latest Muslims accused of raping, molesting and forcing into prostitution 23 girls aged between 13 and 17 in the years 2007 to 2013? No, he will remain silent on that score. Not for them the public humiliation meted out well before any trial and certainly capitalised on after such trial. Not for them the financial burden of defending themselves by having to sell off their family homes, and not for them the leper-like distance as for many of these Islamic communities it's common practice and a bloody good earner. Why? First, they buy only from their own shops all the drugs and drinks necessary to woo. They often have other party houses their families buy for just that purpose, and the victims are always non-Muslim. A real winner, Afzal. And surely even the British press and media must wonder why you're so hard on old white guys and so soft on your own kind, who are just as bad, if not worse than the historic cases, because they know they're doing wrong in this day and age, but are still getting away with it. In some cases, literally murder. It's time for Avsal to sing a song nearer his kith and kin than ours. We want photos of their homes, their relations, their sexual history. How long have they been over here and where their jobs are? All of which we get with our historic white cases. Fair's fair, innit? And finally, 2 for 1 Day Monday. Every time a new pope is elected, there are many rituals in accordance with tradition, but there is one tradition that very few people know about. Shortly after a new pope is enthroned, the chief rabbi of Rome seeks an audience. He's shown into the pope's presence, whereupon he presents the pope with a silver tray bearing a velvet cushion. On top of the cushion is an ancient, shrivelled envelope. The pope symbolically stretches out his arm in a gesture of rejection. The chief rabbi then retires, taking the envelope with him, and does not return until the next pope is elected. A new pope's reign was shortly followed by the new chief rabbi. He was intrigued by this ritual and its origins were unknown to him. He instructed the best scholars of the Vatican to research it, but they came up with nothing. When the time came and the chief rabbi was shown into his presence, they faithfully enacted the ritual of rejection, but as the chief rabbi turned to leave, the pope called him back. "My brother," the pope whispered, "I must confess that we Catholics are ignorant of the meaning of this ritual enacted for centuries between us and you, the representative of the Jewish people. I have to ask you, what's it all about?" The chief rabbi shrugged and replied, "We have no more idea than you do. The origin of the ceremony is lost in the traditions of ancient history." The Pope said, "Let us retire to my private chambers and enjoy a glass of kosher wine together. Then, with your agreement, we shall open the envelope and discover the secret at last." The chief rabbi agreed. Fortified in their resolve by the wine, they gingerly pried open the curling parchment envelope, and with trembling fingers the chief rabbi reached inside and extracted a folded sheet of similarly ancient paper. As the Pope peered over his shoulder, he slowly opened it. They both gasped with shock. It was the bill for the Last Supper, from Moishe, the caterer. And the night nurse. A very tired nurse walks into a bank, totally exhausted after an 18-hour shift. Preparing to write a cheque, she pulls a rectal thermometer out of her purse and tries to write with it. When she realises her mistake, she looks at the flabbergasted teller and without missing a beat she says, "Well, that's great, some arsehole's got my pen." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.